On my 30th birthday, during our 8th year of marriage, I left with nothing. The house was mine, bought before we married, but I voluntarily signed it over to him in the divorce papers. The car was in his name, and I wouldn't fight for it. I also transferred all my shares in the small but well-known interior design company we co-founded, free of charge. I asked for nothing, taking only the ledger I'd kept for 8 years, detailing every expense. From the first rose he bought me for $9.99, to the $200,000 I fronted for his mother's appendectomy, and the 3 years of mortgage payments I made for his sister's house. This was my youth, 8 years with a clear price tag. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I pushed the ledger's photocopy in front of him, my voice calm. It totals $1.37 million. I'll round down, just give me $1.37 million, and we'll settle our accounts. He looked at me as if I were insane, letting out a sneer. Sarah, you've been bankrolling me for 8 years. Now you're trying to calculate this? I sat cross-legged on the cold floor, using my new phone number to notify my clients one by one. Yes, Mr. David, I've left Ian. The new studio's name? It's just Sarah, my own name. The partner on the other end of the line was clearly stunned, his voice filled with disbelief. Sarah, are you kidding? I remember you always saying, Ethan was resilient, brilliant, and the most promising designer you'd ever met. You even said you'd only marry him, that you'd drain your savings to help him start his business. How could you break up just as the company went public? I didn't answer. My fingertips grazed the cold screen of my phone, and silence engulfed me like a tide. The thought of divorce surprised even me when it first surfaced. 8 years ago, I secretly married Ethan, presenting myself as an ordinary girl to my family. Everyone said I was crazy, giving up everything I could easily have for a penniless young man. But I was convinced then that I had found the man who could see past my privileged background and truly love my soul. I found a casual excuse to hang up, and when I looked up, my eyes met a familiar pair. Ethan had returned at some point. He leaned against the entryway, his eyes downcast, watching me silently, like a wolf assessing its prey. He slowly put on his slippers, then sat on the sofa opposite me, his posture composed. Usually, at this time, I'd time dinner for his arrival, preparing a table full of warm dishes. But today, the dining table was empty, just like my heart. He carried the greasy smell of restaurant food, mixed with another woman's perfume, pungent and nauseating. From a stack of documents, I pulled out 2 agreements and a thick photocopy of the ledger, pushing them towards him. I tried to make my tone sound nonchalant, as if discussing an insignificant business deal. Ethan, let's get a divorce. As we discussed on the phone, I'm leaving with nothing. This apartment was bought with a loan before we married. Even though I paid the mortgage for 8 years, I won't fight you for it, it's yours. The car is registered in your name, I don't want it either. As for the company shares, I've already signed the gratuitous transfer agreement. Your lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I paused, then pushed the thick photocopy of the ledger in front of him, my fingertips slightly white from the pressure. As for this, it records everything from the first $9.99 discounted rose you bought me when we started dating, to the $200,000 for your mother's appendectomy that I paid for, and the mortgage for your sister's wedding home that I paid for 3 full years. Every single financial transaction between us is meticulously recorded here, item by item. The total is $1,374,263. This is what you owe me. It's the depreciation cost of my 8 years of youth, and my investment. Once the money is in my account, we'll settle our accounts. The first crack finally appeared on Ethan's face. He picked up the divorce papers as if they were something filthy. He flipped through them quickly, then looked up, staring at me like a madwoman, with a naked mockery I had never seen before in his eyes. He chuckled, a laugh imbued with his familiar arrogance and disdain. Sarah, you willingly spent 8 years bankrolling me. Now you're trying to calculate this? Ethan looked at me, uttering the words bankrolling me through gritted teeth for the second time. Sarah, don't be unreasonable. You were the one who insisted on bankrolling me in the first place. Now you're using divorce to threaten me? My heart felt as if an icy hand had seized it, slowly tightening, the pain making it hard to breathe. Bankrolling. The word was like a knife, piercing my 8 years of youth. Everyone in our circle knew that the most coveted woman in Eastwood University's design department had been claimed by Ethan, the financially struggling student. They didn't know I had willingly bent down for him to pick. I pursued him. It was me who brought him meals during those days and nights he buried himself in his drawings. It was me who stayed up all night with him, researching for a project, while his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. He had a sensitive stomach, so I learned making him homemade soups. He lived in the dorms, so I took his dirty clothes back to our apartment, washed them one by one, ironed them flat, folded them, and returned them. He always accepted silently. I thought that was his way of loving me, that he saw and appreciated my efforts. So, I willingly followed him for 8 years. Graduation, starting a business, marriage. I laid my entire world at his feet. He didn't even know that the anonymous financial support which saved him from dropping out and allowed him to complete his 4 years of university, was also something I begged my father to provide. I clutched my chest, the pain sharp and clear. I looked at the man dressed in a sharp suit before me, his eyes filled with impatience, and felt an overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity. The news was still glaringly displayed in the business section, the headline as sharp as a knife. The article announced that rising designer Ethan had splurged $1 million on the Tears of Venus necklace for his confidante, Chloe. I had stopped in front of that very necklace in a display window countless times. I had even told him that when I turned 30, I'd buy it as a gift to myself. What had he said then? He'd said it was too expensive, not worth it. Yet, he turned around and put it on another woman's neck. At first, I even deluded myself, thinking it was just a publicity stunt for the company, until I clicked on his social media post, and the picture almost burned my eyes. Chloe, wearing the Tears of Venus, smiled sweetly and captivatingly. Ethan's caption read, "Finally fulfilling your dream." My dream? My dream, in his eyes, was worthless. I gave him a whole week. I wanted an explanation. But he simply flew to a neighboring city for a business trip, not a single call or message. He used the most hurtful silent treatment, trying to sweep the matter under the rug. He probably thought I was still the old Sarah, who would come and go at his whim. He thought my feelings, like those clients he'd poached, would return to him, tail wagging, after a little sweet talking and a cooled temper, ready to serve him again. My parents always taught me that as a young woman of the Zhou family, I could lack anything but dignity. I took a deep breath, suppressing the lump in my throat, and met his gaze calmly. "I cannot accept or be satisfied with how you're handling this." Ethan looked as if he'd heard the most ridiculous joke. He tugged at his tie in annoyance. In those eyes I once adored, now only cold disco. St remained. "Sarah, what do you want? Do you have to make a public spectacle before you're satisfied? I don't think what happened in the past should affect our present relationship." He stood up, looking down at me, his tone filled with a condescending arrogance. "I admit Chloe and I have become closer, but she's my benefactor. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have even graduated from college. What's wrong with me repaying her? Haven't I been good enough to you since we got married?" Oh yes, he was good to me beyond reproach. After we married, he did remember every one of my birthdays, ordering my favorite cake in advance. When I worked late, he'd pick me up. If I occasionally caught a cold or a fever, he'd frown as he bought me medicine and made sure I took it. He sounded like a perfect, irreproachable husband, didn't he? But what if all of this was simply to maintain the normal operation of a dutiful wife? What if everything he did was just because he needed a stable base, a tool that would allow him to focus on his career outside? All his romance went to Chloe's social media post. All his guilt manifested as that $1 million necklace. What was left for me was only routine concern and templated kindness. This love was as cheap as a joke. And I was the biggest joke of all. In our first year of marriage, Ethan's career had just started. He said I was his strongest support, asking me to quit my job and be the woman behind him. I believed him. I managed the company's logistics for him. In outsiders' eyes, I was an incompetent housewife. Only I knew that Ethan's prestige was ignited by my savings and connections. I naively believed we were partners fighting side by side. Until my 30th birthday, when I made him his favorite pot roast and waited for him until late at night. The doorbell rang. I thought it was him. At the door stood a woman with exquisite makeup. The Tears of Venus on her neck glittered, hurting my eyes. It was the one I'd had me read in an auction magazine. Ethan had said it was too expensive, not practical. "You're Sarah," she scrutinized me, her gaze contemptuous. Before I could speak, she walked into the living room as if it were her own home. Her name was Chloe. She sat on my sofa, took off the necklace, and pushed it towards me. "Didn't Ethan tell you? I was the one who funded his university education. He promised to repay me first once he succeeded." My mind buzzed. It was clearly my father who funded him. Seeing my shocked expression, Chloe smiled. She tapped her phone, and a recording began to play. It was Ethan's gentle voice. "Sarah, I need to be with Chloe tonight. Something happened with her family. She's the most important person in the world to me. I can't just abandon her. I remembered that night. I had a high fever, lay alone in bed, and called him countless times. Delirious with fever, I'd foolishly told him, "You take care of yourself too," listening to his gentle instructions. Now, I realized my high fever was less important than his benefactor's mood. Chloe turned off the recording, enjoying my pallid face. Ethan stayed with me that entire night. He said Sarah knows nothing but cooking, and I am his true soulmate. Oh, and he also said that a woman like you couldn't possibly survive without him. She showed me her phone, and the photos and videos of them in intimate moments in various places pinned me to the sofa. I looked at the cold pot roast on the table and suddenly felt utterly ridiculous. The love I thought I had was a fraud. The husband I thought I had was a liar. He used my family's money to support a fake benefactor, and then told her that I was a pathetic waste of space who couldn't live without him. My heart was hollowed out at that moment. He told me to stay home and relax, simply to make it easier for him and Chloe to play the part of a perfect couple at the company. How many of their date expenses were in the reimbursements I processed? I dared not dwell on it, my stomach churning. Ethan didn't return until 3 in the morning, reeking of alcohol and an unfamiliar perfume. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" He walked over, attempting to embrace me. I dodged him. I had printed out my father's bank transfer statements from that year, along with a detailed breakdown of the funds I had advanced for the company, and laid them on the coffee table. Beside them were the divorce papers. "Ethan, let's settle our accounts." My voice was flat, like still water. He looked at the ledgers, his face ashen. He didn't look at the divorce papers, nor the bank transfer statements, but instead stared intently at the numbers, offering no explanation, no apology, not even a trace of remorse. He pointed a finger at me, his eyes now filled only with the rage of being exposed. "You're crazy." He grabbed the ledger I had spent several sleepless nights organizing and tore it to shreds. The paper scraps rained down on me. Then, he grabbed his car keys and stormed out. I could guess he drove all night to Chloe's city, seeking comfort from his soulmate. Looking at the mess on the floor, I felt no ripples in my heart. Good riddance, it saved me the trouble of sweeping up his trash. The next day, sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains. I opened my eyes to a world utterly clear. I started packing my things, my clothes, my books, every trace of myself. In short, I would never look back. On the 7th day after moving out, my studio landed a big client. The deposit was generous, and the client specifically asked for me. But my heart still felt empty, like a broken window letting in a cold draft. My best friend, Sophia, used the code to open my door. She had been coming almost every day, keeping an eye on me, worried I might do something drastic. She immediately spotted the brown paper bag on the floor by the door and picked it up with 2 fingers, a look of disgust on her face. "Coffee and a pastry?" She turned and tossed the entire bag into the trash can. "It's the 9th day, right on time." Sophia came over and poked my forehead. "Sarah, if he cared even a little, wouldn't he know you're lactose intolerant and can't drink soy milk?" She paced angrily in the living room. "Who is he sending these to every day? Pretending to be a changed man? Gross." I gave a faint smile and said nothing. Sophia was right. We had been together for 5 years, and Ethan clearly remembered Chloe's mango allergy, but couldn't remember my soy allergy, which could be life-threatening. He didn't forget, he never bothered to remember. Seeing my downcast expression, Sophia sighed and took my hand. "Come on, let's go build your career. Don't you need to pick out materials for that big client? We're going to the most upscale market in the city, and we'll get the best." She practically dragged me out the door. In front of a booth specializing in imported Italian stone, I saw Ethan. He was turned sideways, gently explaining something to Chloe beside him. "This marble looks grand as a TV feature wall, but its drawback is that it stains easily, so it needs frequent cleaning." That voice, once the tenderness I craved most. Chloe held a floor plan for a detached house, looking up at him with adoration in her eyes. Ethan looked up, and his gaze directly met mine. The tenderness on his face froze, a flicker of panic crossed his features, but he quickly regained his composure. He handed the sample catalog to his assistant and strode towards me. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" He glanced at Sophia, then looked at me, eagerly explaining, "Chloe's a girl, she doesn't understand renovation. I'm just here to help her with some references. Don't overthink it." Chloe, in high heels, followed, intimately linking her arm with Ethan's, her body almost pressing against his. She gave me an apologetic smile, yet the floor plan in her hand was practically waved in my face. "Miss, I'm sorry to have caused a misunderstanding between you and F. N." Her voice was sweet and soft. "Ethan gave me this house. He said I've suffered these past years, and it's time I had a home of my own. As she spoke, she leaned into Ethan's embrace as if shy. He also said you're the most generous person, miss, and surely wouldn't mind such a small thing, right? I looked at her face, full of boastfulness and provocation, and suddenly I laughed. I laughed until tears almost came to my eyes. I couldn't be bothered to look at them any longer, so I turned and walked away. Sarah. Ethan caught up, grabbing my wrist with brutal force. I turned back, looking at him coldly. My gaze must have stung him, as his last shred of patience vanished instantly, and his pent-up fury finally found an outlet. Sarah. I told you there's nothing going on with Chloe. He roared at me in the crowded market, drawing curious glances from everyone around. She's my benefactor. Is it wrong for me to repay her? Is it wrong for me to give her a house as compensation? Every word of his was like a sledgehammer, pounding on my already battered heart. Can't you be more reasonable? Why do you have to be so irrational? Irrational. I looked at his face, distorted by anger, and suddenly felt that even arguing had lost its meaning. Divorce. At that moment, the idea transformed from a vague thought into an incredibly clear and resolute decision. That evening, Ethan returned home. This house, which we had chosen together, felt unfamiliar to me for the first time. The living room lights were blazing, illuminating everything, leaving nowhere to hide. He sat on the sofa, his shirt collar wrinkled, a stubble on his chin, looking utterly defeated. When he saw me, a flicker of light appeared in his eyes, immediately replaced by panic. I guessed he'd been calculating all day, and if I hadn't come back, he would have gone to my best friend's place to corner me. At midnight, I finally arrived. Not for him, but for myself. Some things needed to be settled. Sign them, W. Without a single wasted word, I took the freshly printed divorce papers from my bag, along with the clearly itemized ledger, and placed them on the coffee table in front of him. The papers hit the glass tabletop with a soft, decisive thud. Ethan stared intently at the papers, his brow deeply furrowed. He looked up, his bloodshot eyes filled with confusion and pain. Sarah, I was just repaying a debt of gratitude. I never touched her. We were innocent. Why are you insisting on divorce over something so trivial? He couldn't understand, still couldn't understand. I looked at him and suddenly found it rather amusing. He was like an actor living in his own script, forever unable to grasp the audience's feelings. Seeing my prolonged silence, the last flicker of hope on Ethan's face died out completely. He dejectedly lit a cigarette, his hands trembling slightly, then moved to sit on the sofa next to me, cautiously, as if afraid of disturbing me. Sarah, he murmured, as if talking in his sleep. Do you want to hear the story of her and me, of that benefactor? I didn't say yes or no, just watched him with indifference. He continued, speaking to himself. Chloe and I are from the same hometown, and we were college classmates. You know my family's situation, we were very poor. If it weren't for a kind soul who kept sending me money anonymously, I wouldn't have been able to finish college. I always wanted to find that person and thank them in person. Until one time, Chloe accidentally let it slip that she had been secretly doing charity work under a pseudonym, funding financially struggling students. He believed this implicitly, treating Chloe as the goddess who saved him from the mire. Then, you appeared. He suddenly turned to me, looking at me with burning intensity, like a beam of light, never scorning my poverty or mocking my foolishness, supporting all my unrealistic dreams. I thought then that fate had been kind to me. When I succeeded, with a benefactor on one side and a lover on the other, I swore I'd give both of you the best life. Every word he spoke was like self-hypnosis. He portrayed himself as a loyal, grateful hero, full of integrity. He turned his head, trying to catch a flicker of emotion in my eyes, but saw nothing. Sarah, I admit I accepted you because I was truly moved by you. But I knew from the start that there would always be a place in my heart for Chloe. I knew it was unfair to you, which is why I worked tirelessly, wanting to compensate you doubly with material things. Material compensation. As I heard those two words, the last bit of warmth in my heart vanished. So, all my efforts, in his eyes, could be measured by money. He had finally reached the day of his success. He began enumerating his great achievements, his voice tinged with a twisted pride. I bought Chloe an apartment downtown, paid in full. I got her the latest sports car, and I arranged jobs for her parents and siblings. I even transferred 5% of the company's annual net profit to her account regularly. He believed he had acted flawlessly, perfectly balancing gratitude and love. He had done right by his benefactor and also provided me, his wife, with a seemingly prosperous home in the eyes of outsiders. His gaze completely unfocused, he was trapped in his own logical loop. I couldn't help it, Sarah. She's why I am where I am today. I had to repay that debt of gratitude. Looking at Ethan's pained face, I only found it laughable. He still tried to manipulate me with his emotional theatrics. Suppressing my disgust, I decided to finish the story he had been self-righteously narrating for so long. You told Chloe that you worked for years to buy her the Tears of Venus, the one she'd casually mentioned liking in college. My voice was flat, as if stating something that had nothing to do with me. You saw her move to tears when she wore the necklace, and you felt great and loyal, finally repaying that debt of gratitude from years ago, didn't you? I gave a faint smile, puncturing his pathetic hero complex. Then you came home and saw me, dressed in my loungewear, tired from toiling all day for your career, and a wave of annoyance rose in your heart. You thought I was common, unworthy of you. So you complacently enjoyed everything I managed for you, while emotionally cheating, and you called that loyalty. When I finished, the only sound was Ethan's increasingly heavy breathing. He stared at me in shock, and for the first time, panic appeared on that face I once knew so well. After a long moment, he finally squeezed out a dry, hoarse voice, trembling. How did you know? How would I know? I remembered that day, Chloe flaunting the $1 million necklace in front of me. She had said, Sarah, see how much Ethan dotes on me? Not like you, who only cares about how much money was spent. That money was the first fortune I'd helped Ethan earn, staying up countless nights. I once thought it was the foundation of our future. Now, it was time for him to know what his foundation had truly crushed. I took another document from my bag and pushed it towards him. Ethan, the story's over. Sign it. My tone was like discussing a business deal. Also, take a look at this. The bank transfer statements and letters that funded your university education back then? The account holder and signatory were all me. Ethan's pupils constricted abruptly. Your benefactor, from beginning to end, was me. He took several deep breaths, then snatched the documents with trembling hands. On the yellowed stationery were the words of encouragement I'd written, imitating my father's handwriting. Behind every bank transfer statement, the name Sarah was printed. His so-called benefactor was nothing but a lie I fabricated to protect his pathetic ego. I saw the light in his eyes shatter. He finally understood that his deeply believed repayment of gratitude was a one-man show. He wasn't a loyal, righteous protagonist, but merely an ungrateful bastard. His so-called patience and compensation towards me had all been a monumental joke. I wasn't bankrolling him, I was marrying beneath me. He wasn't offering charity, he was bleeding me dry. Impossible. Ethan's voice was squeezed out of his throat. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, staring at me. Sarah, tell me. This isn't true. I looked at him with indifference, not bothering to spare him another glance. Sarah, I know I've been a scoundrel. He suddenly slid off the chair, trying to grab my hand, but I recoiled in disgust. His tears and snot mingled, making him look utterly pathetic. I swear, Chloe and I were truly just repaying a debt of gratitude. I thought her family funded me. I couldn't be an ungrateful bastard. Repaying a debt of gratitude? What a debt of gratitude. The thought of him using my hard-earned money to woo another woman, while calling it repaying a debt of gratitude, made me physically nauseous. The wave of nausea surged to my throat. I abruptly stood up, covered my mouth, and rushed into the bathroom. I leaned over the sink, dry heaving violently, tears streaming uncontrollably. I couldn't throw up anything, just wanted to retch out 8 years of grievance and disgust, along with my very insides. Ethan, who had followed, stopped dead at the doorway when he heard the sounds. Through the door, I heard his desperate murmuring. I'm sorry, Sarah. I regret it. When I came out, composed, Ethan had already signed. On the divorce papers, his name was a messy, distorted scrawl. I walked over, calmly folded the agreement, and put it in my bag. Throughout the entire process, I didn't spare him another glance. 1.37 million. Transfer it to my account within 3 days. I left him with those cold words, then turned and walked away. That was my money, the total amount he spent on necklaces, bags, and cars for Chloe, not a penny more, not a penny less. Behind me, I heard his choked cry. I'll make Chloe return everything. Everything. Sarah, give me a chance. Give me a chance to win you back. His only answer was the soft ding of the elevator door slowly closing. Just as my studio signed its first big client, Chris, my assistant, walked in, her face looking troubled. She handed me her phone. The business news headlines were glaring. Ms. Zhou, it seems Ethan really had a falling out with Chloe. The news reported that Ethan had frozen all assets he'd given to Chloe, from real estate to luxury cars, sparing nothing. He even hired a top-tier legal team to reclaim every penny spent on Chloe over the years. The comment section exploded with all kinds of chatter, everyone eagerly gossiping. I merely glanced at it, then pushed the phone back. Got it. He could dispose of his spoils, I would live my life. We had long since settled our accounts. Not long after, a video of Chloe's family creating a scene below Ethan's company building went viral. They were throwing a fit, crying and cursing Ethan as an ungrateful bastard, a modern-day scoundrel, making an extremely ugly scene. Almost simultaneously, an unknown number called. It was Ethan's sister, Mia. Sarah, are you happy now? My brother's gone crazy. You've ruined him. You've destroyed his life. I hung up immediately and blocked the number. The world finally felt peaceful. Chris looked at me, a little worried. I shook my head, picked up my pen, and continued revising the design draft. It's fine, let them make a scene. Ethan valued his reputation. This big fuss was just a show for me. Unfortunately, I was no longer his audience. I heard the company was in chaos, but Ethan himself was eerily calm. He locked himself in his office, refusing to see anyone. Someone saw through the door crack that he wasn't dealing with the PR crisis, but looking at old things. They were letters I'd written him in college, records of the money I'd saved and sent him, all the humble evidence of my youth. He looked at them over and over, as if studying a scripture he had personally burned. Was it funny? I couldn't laugh, I only felt weary. If only he had known then what he knew now. The day before I planned to leave the city, Ethan's call came through. Seeing the name, I hesitated for a moment, but then answered. I was curious to hear what other tricks he had up his sleeve. After a long silence on the other end, a hoarse voice spoke. Sarah. He used my pet name, his voice filled with careful pleading. The money. I've transferred it. I rounded it up to $2 million, as interest. I was in the middle of discussing the studio's future with my new team, the atmosphere buzzing with excitement. His voice, however, sounded like it came from another, cold and decaying world. Got it, I said flatly. Wait. He called out urgently, reporting his accomplishments at a rapid pace. I've listed that house for sale. Chloe. I sent her to Africa to do charity work. She can forget about ever coming back. His voice was agitated, as if seeking praise. What did he think this was? Proof of his remorse? A bargaining chip to win me back? He was the one who lifted her to heaven, and he was the one who cast her into hell. From beginning to end, he only loved the version of himself who could control everything. Ethan, I interrupted him, what happens between you and her has nothing to do with me. You're doing this to appease your own conscience. Don't waste your breath, I won't come back. With that, I hung up. The conference room instantly fell silent. My colleagues looked at me cautiously. I took a deep breath, flipped my phone face down, and gave them a relaxed smile. All right, let's continue. I didn't want to know Ethan's reaction on the other end of the line. Perhaps despair, perhaps an unwilling roar. But what did it matter? Someone who deliberately threw a treasure into the trash only to search for it again later. That's not love, that's just getting what you deserve. Later. I heard that after hanging up the phone, he sat in his office all night. The next day, his eyes bloodshot, he called his assistant, his voice eerily calm. Go find out what projects Ms. Zhou is currently involved with. Deploy all company resources. We must invest, no matter the cost. He was still the same, thinking money could smooth over everything. He thought this was how he could use his business logic to re-enter my world. Unfortunately, my life was no longer an admission ticket he could buy. 6 months later, when I saw Chloe again, I barely recognized her. She was wearing a pilled, worn-out dress that clung to her emaciated frame, standing out awkwardly at the entrance of my bright studio. Her once curly hair was dry and messy, her face haggard, and the light in her eyes had faded. Sarah, her voice was hoarse. I asked my assistant to pour her some water, while I leaned against my desk, arms crossed, watching her. Can I help you? She nervously gripped the water cup, her eyes darting away. Can we talk? It was that same coffee shop, the usual spot, like a malicious cycle. Chloe stared blankly out the window, turning to me after a long time. She forced a smile, uglier than a cry. Congratulations, Sarah, you won. The jealousy and resentment in her voice sounded as if they were squeezed from between her teeth. I stirred my coffee with a small spoon, watching the ripples spread. I didn't say there was anything to celebrate. My calmness stung her. She let out a cold laugh, her whole demeanor emanating a sense of brokenness. I saw Ethan. He was very angry when he found out I came to see you. Once she started talking, she couldn't stop. He wants me to explain that it was I who deliberately claimed your credit and passed off your design drafts as my own back then. He also said that if it weren't for my current destitution, he would have long since sent a corporate spy like me to prison. She mimicked Ethan's tone, her face full of sarcasm, though it was unclear whom she was mocking. I listened quietly. These revelations merely reconfirmed Ethan's foolishness and her greed. Seeing my lack of reaction, she became even more frantic. My dad gambled away all his money, my mom's gravely ill in the hospital, what else could I do? I was at my wit's end, that's why I resorted to desperate measures. I thought if I just clung to Ethan as my lifeline, I could win. Her voice turned shrill as she began to curse. How is it fair? How is it fair that I'm so miserable while you have everything? Her outburst drew stares. A waiter started to approach, but I stopped him with a look. I was curious to see how far she would take this one-woman show. She hunched over the table, her shoulders shaking with stifled sobs. As her crying subsided, she looked up, her makeup streaked and her eyes bloodshot. She glared past me, her eyes venomous. I went to great lengths to trick him into my grasp, thinking I'd be financially secure for life, but I never imagined you'd keep haunting me. Chloe. A sharp male voice cut her off. I didn't even bother to turn my head. Ethan walked around the table, looking down at Chloe, his eyes full of disgust. I brought you here to apologize, he said, his voice low and laced with warning, not to complain about her presence. His gaze towards me was complex, guilt, regret, and a hint of a plea. Chloe reluctantly bit her lip, not daring to speak again. An assistant walked over and slammed a piece of paper in front of her. A one-way ticket to Africa. Chloe's face turned ashen. She desperately snatched the ticket and stumbled out. The seat opposite me was now occupied by someone else. I remained expressionless. The farce was over, and the director took the stage. He had arrived. Ethan had lost weight. That was my only thought after he sat down. 6 months. Enough time for me to heal, and enough for me to see many things clearly. The bloodshot veins in his eyes, the stubble on his chin, it all just looked like a contrived weariness. I stirred my coffee, not bothering to call out his poor performance. I had lived well these past 6 months. Without him, the air felt sweet. He began by saying he'd been living in our old place every day. I almost laughed out loud. See, a man's self-reflection always focuses only on the parts that benefit him. He began to confess, saying he was a scoundrel, that he shouldn't have used my money to support Chloe, and certainly shouldn't have felt justified in doing so. Sarah, I truly regret it, he said, his voice trembling, hoping to gain my sympathy. Unfortunately, the graveyard in my heart was utterly barren. He brought up my birthday, the day he left me alone at the restaurant. Then he mentioned the necklace called Tears of Venus. At the time, I was planning to buy it for Chloe, he admitted with difficulty. I was afraid you'd find out, so I lied and told you it was a replica. So that was it. I still remembered the slight disappointment I felt when I received the necklace. I thought he didn't understand, but now I knew he simply didn't want to give it to me. He took a deep breath, his eyes bloodshot. The day of your appendectomy, I received a call from the hospital. I knew you were in the operating room, waiting for me. My hand paused, the coffee spoon tapping lightly against the cup with a crisp sound. He had never mentioned this before, but called, saying she wasn't feeling well and wanted to drink. So I just hung up on the hospital. The air froze. I remembered waking from the anesthesia, the hospital room empty, filled only with the smell of disinfectant. The nurse said they couldn't reach my family. I had naively thought at the time that he must have been busy. So he hadn't just missed the call. He had received it, and then hung up. I told myself you were strong, and it was just a minor surgery. But I forgot, even the strongest person needs company. His voice was filled with pain, but I only found it absurd. He hadn't forgotten, deep down, he believed I wasn't worthy. He even confessed that he had never genuinely cared for me, because no one would cherish a woman who was bankrolling him. What a profound self-reflection. Too bad, it was too late. It wasn't until you left that I realized the person I pushed away with my own hands was the only one in this world who truly cared for me. He looked up, his gaze shattered, as if begging. He believed this belated repentance would be enough to make me change my mind. That property, I've already donated it in your name. E-Design has also been dissolved. I've registered a new company, named after Rebirth, the painting you did when we first met. All the shares are in your name. He took a document from his bag and pushed it across to me. Next, there was a medical report. I'm not sick, I'm clean. He pushed that paper over too, as if presenting a treasure. Sarah, I know I was wrong. Give me a chance to start over, okay? He held his breath, his eyes full of expectation, as if waiting for a verdict. Unfortunately, I wasn't a god. I was just someone he had figuratively killed once, and who had come back to life. I said nothing, pulling out my phone to glance at it. Daniel, I'm waiting for you downstairs, no rush. I smiled. In all these 6 months, it was the first time I had genuinely smiled in front of Ethan. I stood up, picked up my handbag, and throughout it all, never once glanced at the gestures of sincerity on the table. As I passed him, I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but it reached his ears clearly. Ethan, do you know why trash is called trash? Because once it's thrown away, no one ever goes back to pick it up. I turned and walked out, turning my back on him for good, ready to embrace my new life. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to share your perspectives, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. See you next time.